What up, everyone? Don't forget the Maui BJJ retreat is back. Go over to the website, elliottmarshall.com, and you can get more information there. And you can put in your information to get more information. Excuse me about that. So, elliottmarshall.com, click on Be a Badass, click on Retreats, and there you will see BJJ Retreat, and you will be able to get all the information you want by entering your information so that we can get you a spot reserved to come to Maui. Aloha culture, great jiu-jitsu, great epic hike that we're going to go on in what's called the Bamboo Falls. Can't wait to see you there. elliottmarshall.com. Click on Be a Badass. What's up, guys? This is former UFC fighter Elliot Marshall, and you are listening to The Blueprint. I believe that there's a blueprint of how the most successful people structure their lives. They don't all do it the same. They don't all do the same things. And on this podcast, you're going to hear inspirations, motivations, and stories about how they go through their life. These stories will give you clues and tricks of exactly how you can discover your passion, find your power, and then go give your purpose to the world. Thank you so much for listening. Let's jump into this week's episode. This episode of the podcast is with Nick Bradley. Nick is an entrepreneur who helps other entrepreneurs both scale and then sell their businesses and sell it for a large profit. We didn't really talk too much about that. We talked a lot about personal growth and how to be better in the world and the way that you can really improve yourself, and that will help improve your business. So without further ado, here we go. Nick Bradley. Nick, my homie, we just discovered our love for basketball together.
We did. Elliot, It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on the show
thanks
today.
for coming on, man. You're a Larry Bird fan, but since
Yes.
since we've discovered this love, we have to ask a very, very important question. Who's the GOAT?
The GOAT for me, and this probably shows my age, right? And there's a couple of contexts here, which I'll get into, but the GOAT for me is Michael Jordan.
Okay, it doesn't show your age.
But-
It just shows common sense.
Wow. But I also love Kobe. But then I think I had a bit of a love affair with Kobe because he was there when I was playing a lot.
Look, it's super simple for me when I ask this question. And once you get into those three, because it's those three, it's Michael, it's Kobe, it's LeBron. This is my GOAT talk. And recently, LeBron has moved past Kobe. Like the scoring thing was really big. I'll say that. But when we're separate, and I love them all, I really, really love them all for different things, right? Like Michael for his greatness, Kobe for the Mamba, and LeBron for his overall skill and what he's done for so many people in the world, right? Like,
And longevity in the game as well. I mean, he's played at a high standard for more years than I can think of anyone that's done that in basketball.
and he lived up to the hype, right? Living up to the hype is really hard when the hype starts at 16.
Yeah.
Right? Like
there's a few more recent ones that haven't, but we don't have to name them. But
all of them. Who has? Who?
Well, the only one currently that I think has the potential is Luka Doncic.
Yeah,
in
but
terms
Luka
of-
wasn't LeBron.
No, I mean the one that's disappointed everyone, I think, is Zion
Yeah.
so far.
The Zion thing for me, I think he's just too big. Like he's too big for his body. And going from a 30-game season in college to an 82-game season in the NBA, like that body that he has, which is amazing, right? Like, I mean, it can do amazing things.
It's a linebacker body, isn't
Right.
it? I mean, it's like when he lost some weight, I think it was not last season, the season before, he looked a lot better. But I remember one thing, right? I think it was his first season. He was injured. It might have been when he came back on the second season. But anyway, it was one game that he played, and it was like the only game he played for the season. And he came on and he scored 30 points in like a quarter and a half,
Right.
hitting threes. And I just remember thinking, what is this guy?
Yeah.
hadn't seen a quarter and a half like it, like inside, outside, all that. So
Yeah.
lots of hype, but hasn't played enough. When he plays, sensational.
Yeah, it's just too hard, right? And again, for LeBron, it's the longevity, the what he's been able to do off the court as well as on the court for me. But when it comes down to it, it's who do I want in Game 7 of the NBA Finals?
Oh,
And
yeah.
who do I
now we get
know?
into mentality, though, here,
Yes.
like in terms of that, like, and the mindset behind this stuff. Because I think, even if you put like Kobe and Michael, they had a similar
Mindset.
kind of way of approaching the
Yeah.
game. Right. And if you read I've read their books. There was a book called The Jordan Rules that came out a long time
in the
before any of
90s,
this
in
stuff.
the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was one of the first. It was written by a reasonably famous sports journalist.
Yeah,
And
Steve Smith was his name.
yeah, and it talks a great book, right? If you kind of want to go back in time and see what was going on, because it was written around the time when Jordan was kind of coming up, not quite when he was right there, but on the way up. And it just talks about how difficult he was to be around, how obsessed he was, and you see a little bit of that in that show that came out, The Last Dance, but not to the level. And it kind of brings up the question: to be the GOAT, do you have to be like that?
I think you have to be like. I almost think you have to be an asshole. Like he's a dickhead.
Well, you have to be just single-minded, right?
Yeah, but he's an asshole in every way in his life, right? He's not a great dad. He's not a great, he gives his kids whatever they want, but like he's not there. He's not present. He's a terrible husband. We know this. You can't be his friend. He's terrible to fans. All of that stuff, right? Is that what it takes?
It's a choice, isn't it? Maybe
Is that what it takes? I don't know.
Do you know, it's funny. I asked this question recently because we were talking about it in a different sport. And actually it was in tennis.
Okay.
And I was with some guys who were very close to being pro. In fact, one of them was in the top 50 when they were a junior.
Okay.
And I said, Roger Federer, right? Like pretty much the greatest tennis player, certainly from kind of, male tennis player.
It's him and
What's
Nadal.
he like? Yeah. And they know, the people I was speaking, they know both of them personally from both just great people. He said they're both fantastic. There's a couple of others that are up there that aren't.
So here's my argument though, with this GOAT thing. Michael Jordan is the GOAT of all GOATs. We have never seen anybody do anything better than what we saw Michael Jordan doing on a basketball court.
Tom Brady?
No, he lost. He lost he lost Super Bowls. He lost Super Bowls. He didn't make playoffs.
He should have left after the tackle.
He should have left, right? Like, so, and I'm saying no, and I'm not saying sports. I'm saying presidents. I'm saying CEOs. I'm saying all of it. Nobody did anything better. What Michael Jordan did in that 8-year span, he had the world captivated. He couldn't and I don't know that almost on a Tiger Woods level, right? And probably more than Tiger almost. But I don't know that we can understand what that takes. Like me and you just, I do my thing.
Well, I wouldn't want to necessarily go that far. My drive to be that good at that one thing, I prefer to be good. I prefer to be good at a few things than absolutely the GOAT at one. So that's a different choice, right?
Right. And I don't know but the question is, do we have the ability? And I don't think everyone does have the ability, right? Like that he was a special guy with a special upbringing. I don't know that I have the ability to be the absolute best in the world at anything. I fucking tried. I tried my ass off. I couldn't have tried.
It depends
harder.
how you define ability, though, isn't it? I mean, because I think there's a couple of things here, right? One is environment, right? Because a lot of people who become great come from quite destructive, painful upbringings, right? There's usually something that drives, right, or becomes that thing. Then you've got the mindset, that tenacious mindset, that disciplined mindset that has a balance between belief and that just doggedness to not lose, right, in whatever you try, right? And then you've got the actual ability, physical ability, whatever the thing is that you're trying to achieve,
right?
And I've always thought about this. I don't have an answer for it, but I've been thinking, was Michael Jordan, was Kobe, right? If you look at Kobe's background, were they just great athletes? I mean, they obviously were pretty damn good athletes, right?
Yeah, of course.
But there was stuff that they did when they were younger before people saw the talent.
100%.
Do you know what I get at? It's weird, right? And then it's like, and this is going to sound a little bit kind of esoteric, but because you're putting so much commitment in at that age, and does that then change your body a bit? Do genetics suddenly start to evolve? Because some of these people didn't have 6'7" people in their family before.
It's an interesting thing. It's hard to. I think so much of it is luck. Luck, which is timing. It's so much of that. maybe somebody in the 70s and 80s was as good as MJ, let's say, but Nike wasn't ready to blow up. Because part of what made MJ blow was Nike, right? Like that shot his start and his performance. So did Dr. J have the physical ability of Michael Jordan, and then Nike wasn't around yet, let's say? So then therefore he just kind of stayed in the shadows a little bit. And because you and I both know part of this mindset thing is just this confidence and belief. So Michael came around when it really started getting filmed and put out in the world. So then if you really believe the hype and it keeps coming true, I mean, I'll take confidence over any performance enhancing drug in the world. You can take all the steroids. If I have all the confidence, I'll take it.
Well, there's enough evidence to show, that placebo effect of that anyway, right? So we can, I have this belief, again, just a personal thing, whether it's true or not in terms of science or whatever, that we tap into only a small percentage of our capability anyway, right? Certainly that's proven in the mind, right? How much of our brain we use. And I do wonder that if certain circumstances, like what you said, right, believe the hype, because that's like getting an affirmation every minute of every day, right? And I wonder if that just starts to program you differently. And then once you have that true confidence and belief in yourself, that's when different things start to manifest around you. You do attract different things. Yeah. Like when you walk into a room when you can't lose, it's a very different atmosphere than if you go in there thinking that, you are going to get killed.
I thought the greatest thing about The Last Dance was episode 10. And early on in that episode, when they were getting off the bus and Michael was listening to that music, and then they all went and shot that half-court shot, and they all missed, and Michael hated it. And Michael hit it. And they asked him, or somebody said, and he was like, why in the world would I think about missing a shot that I haven't taken yet? And that's a crazy belief, because of course everyone else is thinking about missing it, right? Like, because there's only two options. It's not like there's three options. It's not like you have all these things that are possible and then you're like, yeah, fuck it, whatever, but this is literally an A-B scenario. So why not think about A and B? And that mindset is just something special. And I want to know everything about it. I really do.
It's interesting when you read. I said when you read the biographies, some of them autobiographies, but most of them are the kind of the outsider looking in, or the insider looking at what's going on around them. But there is definitely patterns against these things, like different traits for sure.
Did you watch the Tiger thing on HBO?
No, I haven't. But I do know from a business perspective that it was he and Jordan were the only, and it might have changed since then, but they were the only ones who had equity in Nike as part of their contracts. Yeah. I know others tried to do it afterwards, but they were really well in. I mean, the growth of Nike came from those two athletes. Yeah. Certainly at the time.
The Tiger documentary was, it was amazingly insightful. Like what his dad did to him was terrible. and he's Tiger fucking Woods. He's the greatest golfer.
Well, you saw that. What was that one? The King Richard movie, the Serena Williams and Venus. I mean that's borderline as well, isn't it?
Yeah. But look at the ball. Look at LeVar Ball, right? Well, he's got 3 kids in the fucking NBA.
I know.
So can you fault it?
It's interesting. It's interesting to see how these things, it depends, doesn't it?
I know.
It depends back to, whose life are you kind of influencing and living, and then a lot of these guys have massive crashes, they have other things go on. So it does make you think about, I'm sure they love
almost
the fact
everyone,
that they're the best in the world.
Almost everyone has a massive crash. Michael's the only one that has
there is a psychology behind this, if you want to know how that works.
I would love to.
So there's an interesting theory. We learned this when I was in private equity. A lot of private equity, when you work in that sort of high level world of business, is you get taught how people think, right? You get quite a lot of education around this stuff. And this particular thing we're talking about here is if you have extremes, let's say, for example, you see it all the time with the lottery winner who, wins the lottery, then they give it away within a year, right? You see that. It also happens when someone becomes, let's say, like a reality TV star very quickly. They were nothing. Now they're this thing, and a lot of them go off to kill themselves, commit suicide. It's quite a common trait. And what that is the extreme of either a positive or a negative, because it happens both ways, that happens too quickly and too extreme in one direction, you get brought back to the center. Right? It's partly about comfort zone, but it's also about the idea that if you rise too quickly, psychologically, it's very hard for us to be out and emotionally to connect with that. And that's why a lot of these sports stars who get drafted in the top 5 or 10 go off and take lots of drugs or do other things, because they just haven't got that balance correct in their own psychology.
You just said this word balance. And I used to have this coach that I used to work with, and he's like, look, man, the universe is always going to stay in balance. Like it's going to balance. So, and one of the exercises that he used to have me do, and that I do now with my athletes, is when something really, really great happened. Like, I'm a MMA coach, right? So I'm like, okay, find me the drawbacks. Find me the bad of the winning. Find me the bad of that. And it's like, yo, dude, I just knocked that motherfucker out in 2 minutes. I got a bonus check. I made 300 large. You're asking me to, find the bad. And then when you lose, find the good. What good? Not what good is gonna come. Not what's going to happen. Literally right now, what's the good? And
it's exactly that point. It's benefits and drawbacks.
Yes,
and
he used the same words. Yep.
And the idea is that if anything really, again, what's good and what's bad is defined a little bit by our expectations and things like that. But let's say something happens that you think is terrible for you, whatever that is, right? And some things can be quite horrific. If you can train yourself to see the benefit in the terror, right? And equally, if something amazing happens, you can see the benefit and the drawback in that amazing thing as well. It keeps your psychology much more straight.
Neutral.
So that you're much more likely, neutral. You're much more likely to have sustainability, right? As opposed to having the extremes. And the extremes can really throw you off. I don't necessarily believe 100% in balance happens all the time. You have seasons of balance and you have seasons of things where they're more chaotic and extreme. But the more you can get back to that neutrality, the better.
When did you start developing this type of thinking, or even get into this type of thinking, right? Because not everyone's doing it, right? When you hit the lottery, you're like, oh, fuck yeah, let's go. Benzes and Lamborghinis for everyone.
Well, I had a bit of an incident, right? So this is where I had to kind of lean into this, because I was going down a certain path which wasn't serving me, my family, all those sort of things. I kind of comes back a little bit to identity, right? So it's funny, like a lot of my friends, because I was in this kind of extreme world of finances and stuff we can get into. Have you ever seen the show Billions?
Yeah.
Okay, so all my friends call me Bobby Axelrod. For those who I'm holding up a little tiny caricature of Bobby Axelrod, who's the main star in Billions, because I was a bit like that. I was doing really high level deals. Some of the deals were in the 9 and 10 figure range, right? Like right up there.
So billions, and hundreds of millions and billions.
I've been involved in 3 above $1 billion deals. And multiple other ones. So my background, just for context, I was in private equity for 15 years, buying, selling businesses, involved in scaling and exiting, all that sort of stuff. But in 2017, bordering into 2018, I was closing one of these deals. I was involved in this big deal. Lots of things were going on at the time. And one of the big things was my dad came back into my life after being away for about 35 years. He left when I was 2-ish, right? And then came back, 35, 40 years later. And I learned a lot about myself from meeting him, because of course you can't remember, if you're 2 years old, you can't really remember anything, right? Let alone what your dad's like, right? So I meet him, he comes back in, he then gets cancer and dies very quickly, literally within a few months later.
And did not have cancer knowingly beforehand.
No. Well, he did actually have cancer, had that treated a number of years before.
Okay. But he was healthy
when I got healthy when we met. Okay. And our relationship was for about 2 or 3 years. And then in the last year, he was diagnosed around about Christmas time, and then he died in October.
Okay.
But here's the thing. So I'm sort of starting to learn more about myself because I meet him. Right. So all these kind of different things are happening. I've got this massive deal about to close. There's a lot of infighting and all sorts of crazy games that happen when you're dealing with that sort of money. It's off the charts. People just can't comprehend it, right? And so I went to bed one night and I cracked the teeth all on the right side of my jaw. I literally, it's more than grinding. Like people say, oh, you grind your teeth. Well, it wasn't grinding. It was like clenching and breaking, right?
While you were sleeping, you did it?
Yeah. I woke up at 3 a.m. and I went to the mirror in my bathroom and I was in heaps of pain. It was like I'd been punched in the face, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had like little shards of teeth, like quite a few bits. I'm thinking, what's this? Like, and it was teeth, right? And it was painful, but it was kind of just surprisingly weird and swollen, and it was hard to explain, right? Anyway, I went to the dentist. I went to the doctor first, then the dentist, and they said that your body is just stressed to huge levels, right? And I wasn't feeling good at the time, right? Again, it's all this extremity of different situations happening.
Mm-hmm.
I call it pretty much it was a nervous, therefore physical breakdown, because I was living this kind of life, or coming to a realization, probably the best way to say this, of living a pathway that was absolutely incongruent with my values and what I wanted to be. And so my body then decided to give me a lesson, quite a positive lesson if I look back in hindsight, right, to change. But it was at that point, to your question, it was at that point I thought, you know what, I need to learn what's going on here, because I was intoxicated into this world, right? Lots of egos, narcissists, money, all sorts of stuff going on. All the things you would expect and you see in the TV shows is kind of what it's like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just showing up like the worst dad for my kids, and I was just like this egocentric arsehole. And then my body just said, that's it. And that was it. So then I had to learn. Firstly, I changed everything after that. But I also had to learn what was going on from a kind of scientific level to then comprehend what I needed to do next.
Yeah, we have a similar story. Not with the billions of dollars, but in fighting, Yeah. And yeah, my body, same thing. My body's, mine presented with massive anxiety, which I'd suffered with my entire life, and I want you to do me a favor, and I'm veering here for a second. I'm really trying to stop saying, because no, you don't know. That's why I'm fucking telling the story. So just say asshole every time I say,
I'll do my best, but I'm usually quite present that I'm listening to the story. So I probably say a lot. I don't know. I'm Australian. We kind of say all sorts. Okay, I'll do my best.
All right. I'll help you with you help me with So
perfect.
And I just had this, what I like to call mental breakdown / spiritual awakening, where I had to change. I had to make different choices for Elliot and not be how I was. So it was, I think this happened. Do you think it happens to a lot of men?
Do you know, I've done so much since then in terms of understanding and trying to work on myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the podcast that I have is very much about that, and I'll kind of get into why I did it. But I now look backwards, say 20 years, 30 years of my career, and I realize I was making decisions that weren't for me, right? They were decisions to impress other people or to, make promises that I made to grandparents that wanted me to go to uni and then do these sort of things. There's lots of, I suppose, expectation or implied pressure that I had to follow a pathway. Right. So I think, to your question, is that common with men? I think it's probably more common with men than women.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's that, particularly when you kind of grow up at a certain age. Like I had a very strong-willed grandfather who was amazing in so many ways, but he was hardcore, like full on. Discipline, this, you will do this. At the same time, he was incredibly supportive. So I learned a lot from him, but at the same time, I wouldn't dare to go and do anything different to what he wanted me to do. So is that good or bad? I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I certainly did more things than maybe I expected that I would achieve at a younger age, but then I had to have this quite significant pivot later on.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like for me, it was my grandfather. I have a similar grandfather, a Holocaust survivor. Right, my mom was Jewish and Holocaust surviving grandparents, and he was ridiculously difficult. Mine with loved me, like you said, but with the fighting and all of this, like stupid, la da da da, and then I can remember on his deathbed, like the last time I'm seeing him, and he had done well for himself, all based on fear, right? All based on fear of being able to run from Hitler the next time Hitler came.
Wow.
So, and then I can remember him saying, give Elliot what he wants. Because my career was ending and I was going to open these schools with my business partner. He already had some. And he was like, just give him whatever he wants. And this was it. Then I hugged him, I kissed him, we said goodbye, and he dies. So I had this massive guilt, this massive like, yo, I better make this fucking happen. Because for me, it wasn't just like money. This is blood money, right? This is money that is going to save the family from the Holocaust. Another one. So it's like, oh, and I had to get through this, and I still have to deal with this.
When was that, Elliot? How long ago was that?
This was 2000, right at the end of my career. So 2010, 2011. He died in 10, and then my career ended at the end of 11, and then we opened the schools. The small jiu-jitsu schools were already open, and then we went big in the beginning, the end of 2012. So. It was.
Do you ever look back at that and go, was that a blessing for you that he said that, or did it kind of just increase pressure?
It was definitely a blessing. Okay. It was definitely a blessing because I look at everything as a blessing. I'm sure, kind of as you do, whether it increased pressure or not. That's a yes as well, but it probably helped cause the breakdown that happened, and then the rebuild. Right. So, I'll take it. I try to go with everything. Like, okay, well, at some point we'll find the benefit, even if I can't.
One of my coaches kind of said this to me, and I thought it was quite interesting. He said, and it's exactly the point we're talking about here. Things are not in the way; they're on the way. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's the context of, even if something feels, let's say, painful in the moment, it's just part of the journey, right?
Right.
When you get separation from that, like I look back at that sort of 2017, 2018 year, when my dad died, it was very uncertain and complex, and I was super confused. But if I look back to what I did after that and the different decisions I made after that to where we are today, sort of 5 years later, it was like that overused analogy of the Matrix, the red and the blue pill. Mm-hmm. It was like I couldn't see the world the same way again. Like I couldn't see it. Like there's no way. Like it's hard to describe to people who haven't been there, but beforehand I was living in a different world.
And you can't see it that way anymore. Like you cannot fathom how you thought before, correct?
No, there's no way I could go back to it either. If I think what I've done, what I've done since in terms of the people that I've met, the different opportunities that have presented themselves, how I live my life these days, right? All of those things, fundamentally different things to what they were,
take us
10
through
years
them.
ago or so.
Take us through them. So 2017 happens. Your dad dies, right? Your teeth are broken in your mouth. You wake up 3 a.m. Did the shift happen? Like was it that night that your teeth were broken? Or take us through the story.
Well, I was suffering before that. That whole year was a weird year because I was the CEO of one of the divisions of this company that we sold to Blackstone, which is the biggest private equity group in the world. And I was, back then it's funny actually. I think I had more of a victim mentality around certain things. And these days I like to own it all.
God, we have to be best friends, I think, Nick, because like this is it's no different.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's funny how people connect through this type of medium. So I had a situation where I was supposed to have a certain role in this company. The business sold for $2.3 billion in the end, right? It's off the charts. And I was supposed to have a certain role in that. And then after I'd accepted the job, literally 6 weeks after accepting the job, this woman was brought in to sort of go between me and the job I thought I was having. Now, I can look at that and say, well, there's no way they just found this person, right? They knew that, like, she just turned up. Wow, isn't that interesting?
That's crazy.
It was kind of all planned. And I was sort of set up in a way to do a certain thing. And at the time, I didn't like that thing. Now, if that happened again, I'd be like, hey, listen, I know exactly what's going on here. I'm just going to leverage it.
Right.
But at that time, I was not probably emotionally aware enough to deal with that. So that whole year was really challenging. So we're doing this big exit. I'm doing this stuff. I'm fighting with this new boss that I've got. My dad's come back. He then says he's got cancer. We don't know how long he's got. I'm flying all over the world trying to close this deal, coming home and just being an absolute arsehole to my family because I'm hating myself through this. Mm-hmm. Put on all this weight, probably about 25 pounds heavier than I am now. Lots of stuff going on. Anyway, so So this all happens. I'm not feeling great. The teeth thing happens right towards the end. And I remember getting up the next day and I said to my wife, I said, I've got to get out. I've got to change it all. I've got to change this. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, but I've got to change it. And she was like, oh, thank God you've come to that realization. Like, okay, well, you realize, the 2 Porsches in the house, it's going to change a bit if we change this, right? You get paid extremely well. We've got the kids in private school. We've got all the perks that you would expect from a private equity lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, if I'm going to make this change, I'll try not to make it affect you, but I don't know what I'm going to do, right? So anyway, so I called up a friend, and he was a very successful entrepreneur when we were at sort of university. He was the entrepreneurial guy, quite a quiet guy, didn't really drink anything or go out much.
So when you were in college, he was a loser because that's when entrepreneur was 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Pretty much. He was kind of not quite as successful as, the Facebook guy, right, Zuckerberg or whatever. However,
but that's what it was thought of. If you said you're not, I've discussed this a bunch. If you said you were an entrepreneur 20 years ago, you were a dork.
Yeah. And in fairness, pretty close to that.
Right.
A very a funny guy. Like he was part of the group, but wasn't, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, he ended up retiring in his early 30s. He started an advertising agency, sold that for millions, and then, bought an island somewhere off the coast of Greece and just travels around the world with his wife and just does nothing really, right?
I don't know if I could do that though, but go ahead.
No, well, he probably does a lot more than that.
Okay.
I'm probably, giving a disservice to that, but he's definitely not like in the limelight of, going out to every party in Monaco and all that stuff, but he probably does a lot of philanthropy and things. But anyway, just quiet guy, but doesn't have to work ever again. Right. So I called him up and said, listen, I've got to change this, and told him the situation. I said, what do you suggest I should do? And he said, funnily enough, he goes, I'm going to give you some advice. You're going to think it's really weird, but you've got to do it. He said, promise me you'll do it before I tell you what it is. I'm like, well, that's a bit shit. Like, and he goes, it's not harmful. It's just, you're going to say no instinctively because you always used to say no to this, but I want you to say yes and then just commit to it. And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do it. He goes, I want you to go online. I want you to go and search up Tony Robbins and find out when he's running the next UPW event in the world. And I want you to book the tickets. And I'm like, I'm not going to a Tony Robbins event. Like, are you a muppet? Why am I doing that? And he said, all those years back when you guys were going out and doing that sort of stuff, I was just going to his events. And I was working on myself, right? And I was just working on kind of how I was going to create this lifestyle. So he said, don't judge it. He said, give it a go. So I go online, and the next event's about 5 weeks away from I've had this conversation, and it's in Chicago. So we're gonna get a little bit circular now with Jordan. Right? Now, I've never seen Jordan play other than on TV.
Fuck yeah.
Right. And guess where the event is?
What year is it?
This is 2018.
Okay. So
guess where the event is? It's in Chicago.
Chicago.
It's in the United Center. Right. So I get on a plane and I turn up to this Tony Robbins event. Now, when you go into the United Center, right, where Jordan pretty much won all the championships, yeah, his statue's in the hall and in the rafters is all everywhere. Of the things. Yeah. So I'm like, man, like this is kind of like a weird experience because he was such a transformative figure of me, growing up. Like, I had posters of him all over the walls, right? So here I am at this Tony Robbins event in the, as they joke, the house that Jordan built, right? And for 4 days, I go through this incredible journey of emotions. Like if you haven't done a Tony Robbins event, it's an interesting experience because he, like him or not like him, he definitely gets you thinking differently, right? And I remember just hearing things I'd never heard before. Like one of the quotes he talks about is a Zig Ziglar quote, which is, if you help enough people get what they want in life, you'll have everything that you kind of want and need in life. Now, I'd never heard that before. And in private equity, you'd be like kicked out of the club for saying shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so I remember I was crying my eyes out half the time. I was going through all sorts of emotions. And I made a decision through that experience. It's 4 days. And I said, you know what? I'm going to come back and quit private equity. I'm going to quit. So I came back and I thought I'm not going to do it straight away because of the situation I mentioned beforehand. I'm not going to make my family suffer. I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to basically do one last gig and I'm going to build my future through that. Right. Now, some people would say, oh, is there integrity in that? You were working, but what I was doing was trying to be as strategic as possible to create what I wanted to create. And then the first thing I did after that decision was start my podcast, which was at that time called Scale Up Your Business. And I said, you know what? I'm going to basically provide everything for free that I learned from, 10 to 15 years in private equity. I'm just going to give it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of just exploded, Elliot. It just, I think it was partly because I didn't do interviews like this. I just spoke into a mic for 30, 40 episodes, told all the stories, all the tricks, everything. And it was partly for me cathartic, right? To get stuff out of my head. It was partly to contribute. And then off the back of that, what I do now, my whole set of businesses and the things I do now just started from that decision. So that's kind of how it worked. But had I have not done those things, had I not put myself into those different environments and maybe explored different things, I don't believe I would have made that shift.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's a great story. It's a great story. It connects back to basketball, like your love of basketball, right? Like it's so cool though. It's so cool to hear that. No, if there's anything I hope that anybody takes away from this podcast is like, you're not stuck. Like you're not stuck. And you didn't probably seem stuck because you had, I'm sure you're making great money too. Porsche's a great house, right? Like you said, but it felt stuck. It felt stuck to you, and you were able to get unstuck. And I don't know. Do you make more money now? Do you make less money, or does it not even matter?
I make more money now because I own more companies now.
Yeah.
So it's interesting and just to be clear to everyone listening here, it wasn't like, I went to bed one night and all of a sudden had this amazing strategy. I mean, this is evolved, right? It's evolved. It started off like, probably the one thing, the thing that I didn't say about my dad is he was a very successful entrepreneur. I didn't realize that because I didn't know him until he came back into my life. And then I started to think maybe I'm more entrepreneurial than I've given myself credit for. So I kind of say when I started the podcast, I entered the entrepreneurial path more so than previously. And, it's a rough ride, right? We certainly weren't making as much money in the beginning for the first couple of years.
Yeah.
But then I had this idea. I said, I'm going to take the playbook that I learned in private equity and I'm going to just work with founders. And I'm going to teach them everything. If they want to sell their companies for millions of dollars, which a lot of, that's the ambition, it's the American dream in many cases. If you want to have that event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how to do that from the inside out. And
what do you tell them? What are some of the steps?
Oh God, there's heaps of it. So in private equity, we have different techniques and strategies that we use to scale companies, and it's called value expansion, to use a sexy, confusing term. But most people, when they grow and scale a business, they focus on two things. They focus on revenue growth, which is usually about how well they can do marketing and sales. And they look at what's called margin expansion, which is how they can be efficient with their cost base to drive profit. And most business owners stop there, right? They make good lives. It's fine, but you don't make serious money running a business, but you do when you build something that is transferable and exitable. And what private equity do is they'll leverage debt. Like they'll invest more cleverly in certain activities that drive growth faster. They'll look at things like mergers and acquisitions. They'll buy other businesses and bolt them onto other businesses to create groups. It's much easier to scale a business if you buy your, fledgling competitor and suddenly get their customer list. And then they do something very clever, which is called multiple expansion, which is where they flex the multiple of how a business is sold. And basically what that is when you sell a company, it's usually your profit times by a figure. That figure could be 5 times, 7 times, 10 times. And you can actually affect that figure if you build something sizable. So if you get your business, let's say you get your business to a really healthy number of something like, $3 to $5 million in profit, and then you sold that business for say 8 times, right? So let's say 8 times 5 for argument's sake, that's a 40 million payday. And a lot of the people I work with now are selling their companies as low as 20 million. That's about the lowest that we get involved in, or I get involved in, all the way up to around about 200 million.
Got it. Interesting.
Crazy. Yeah. But all I did was say, okay, how can I teach and guide, advise, whatever you want to call it, mentor business owners what private equity do, because there's more millionaires and billionaires in private equity than any other entity. And it's not that complex if you know how to play the game, but most business owners have never been in that world, so they don't know.
Right. It's interesting. You know, I'm a business owner, and we're not at the 3 million yet. You know, what did we do last year? I think we did 1.2. So
there you go.
Yeah.
But if you're getting over that level, you're in the game.
Yeah.
And it's funny, once you understand how the capital markets work, there's something like 8,000 private equity firms now, and that's doubled since I was kind of there. And there's 4 trillion of what we call uninvested funds.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, with your business, you wanted to grow it a bit more with what you're doing, and then at some point you wanted to transfer it to someone else, just because, I mean, everyone has to exit their business at some point,
sure,
right? Regardless of that. Then, you know, that can give you a situation where you can create not just personal wealth and freedom, but generational wealth, depending on how you do it. And so my mission these days, having left that world and realizing that most of the entrepreneurs don't get the value in the businesses that they've created, they give that away too easily when they get into these complex worlds of transactions.
Yep.
My whole mission was, how can I help those entrepreneurs keep more of the value that they created in those companies?
Really cool.
Yeah.
Really
but
cool.
I created all that from, to be frank, the teeth incident.
Right.
Now, my dad passing away, going to that Tony Robbins event, having an epiphany, if you like, change of values, change of beliefs. And then just, to be frank, just trying to work it out.
Would you say change of values, or would you say, you know, kind of being like, you know what, these are my values, I'm not living up to them, so I'm going to change? Or did you actually
I don't think
values?
I knew what my values were before that. I don't think I'd identified them enough. I didn't realize that everything, it's hard to explain it, but maybe it's a bit like the military. I haven't been in the military, but you're taught to think and act a certain way. And if you think and act a certain way that's outside of that sort of, you know, game, if you like,
right,
then, you know, it's a very difficult situation.
Sure.
So you're almost indoctrinated to be a certain character in that environment.
It's really interesting when you start thinking about values. It's a crazy experience, I think, what it does to you. And you're like, all right, my wife, so I have this Hawaiian tattoo that I'm in the process of getting, because we love Hawaii. And
I love it. Cool.
Yeah. We spend about 2 months a year there. And I was thinking about getting it for 2 years, a while. And I was like, man, I don't know. I'm not Hawaiian. I'm not Polynesian. I'm not any of that. And then I did some research. I decided to get it. And then the night that I got it, we're at dinner, and there's our waiter, our server. He had a bunch of them. And my wife asked, and he saw mine. He's like, man, hell yeah, cool tattoo. You're in the process. I'm like, yeah. And my wife goes, isn't it disrespectful? Because, you know, and which was my concern too. And I can remember his look, you know, and because everything means something. There's nothing in the tattoo that doesn't have meaning. And he goes, look, the only thing that's disrespectful is when we see it, if you're not living up to it.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and he's like, look, you can have them, but the problem, he's like, they're called hollies, white guys, right, mainlanders.
Right.
He goes, the problem with you guys, with when we get upset, or you hear that we get upset, is that we see you not living the value, and then it becomes an issue for us. So it was a really interesting thing.
I've never heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense because, it's almost like a mantra to some extent, isn't it? You're setting out the stall of how you're going to act and live. And if you don't do that, then, I can see how that's
a problem.
Because it's very much so.
All right. As we close, Nick, I'd like to ask 2 questions. One,
sure.
Look, you're about scale, like your businesses are about scale and you know, growing businesses. And to part of doing that is doing things like, you know, relating your ROI, your time for money, right? Or your time for things. This podcast ain't going to do it for you. So, I don't have a big enough platform for, you know, yet, let's say. So why sit down with a dude across the pond who maybe it will help your business? Probably not. But why sit down and take an hour out of your day?
You must know the answer to that already. I don't do this to grow my business.
Right. I mean, I know the answer. I just want to hear everyone. It's the same answer almost every time. But
I don't do this to grow my business. I do this because it comes back to that quote, right? That I learned. It sounds crazy to say this, that it's such an obvious thing, but that helping people without expectation, right? I don't do that just because it's a great service to everything. It makes me feel different about me.
Right.
Right. And how I then show up at home with friends, work, all of that, it changes the whole way that I approach life. So when I come and spend, a conversation like this, I've enjoyed the conversation. All right. I could go on and talk about basketball forever.
Yeah,
we
for
could have
sure.
done a whole hour on that. but it's also, there's two parts for it to me. One is maybe I said something today, maybe it was just a line or whatever else that hit someone at the point where they needed to hear it. Right. And that then caused them to go and think differently or do something differently that had a positive impact or change in their lives. Now, I'll never know that, right? You'll never know that.
Right.
But it might happen, right? So there's that. And the second thing is, since I started doing this, I have made the most incredible friendships, partnerships. Like, I remember back when I used to travel the world in private equity, and I used to go to these cities, usually in America, and I would sit in my hotel room or go to a restaurant by myself, and I wouldn't know anyone in these cities. There probably isn't a city now in the US particularly, and even across the world, where I can't connect with someone that I've met through a platform like this and just go and have a meal, have a coffee, have a chat, all those sort of things. So for me, it's just changed the whole trajectory of where I was, certainly from where I was heading, to something that's much more fun and exciting as well.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is I want to hear everyone repeat the same damn answer.
Was it the same answer?
Yeah,
pretty much.
Everyone's is the same, right? But this is the message that, like, it's the quote. Just go do it, because 1, you enjoy it. 2, it might help somebody, and 3, you're not looking for a fucking ROI. You're literally not. So, and I think when we can get away from that, especially in this world of what's going to come back to me, it just goes better, because it leads into my next question, and the final one here. I believe everyone has a unique power that, if you're religious, God gave you. If you're not religious, the universe gave you. But I call God and the universe all the same thing. So it was given to you at birth. I think the hard part is discovering that power, right? Discovering what that thing is. And then you go and give that to the world. You just give it to the world. And then what the world gives back in return is exponential in what it gives back. What's yours?
So, this has hit me a few times in my life, and I've always smacked it down, right? But if I go back even from when I was coaching basketball, in my teens and all that, to kind of what I was doing in business to what I do now, it's really inspiring people that they can achieve more than they think they can, right? And I find now that even if I work with a business owner who's going, I don't know what to do, I don't know, half the time it's like, would you just get the fuck out of your head and realize that you're here to play a bigger game, right? This is not just about you in this small space that you're playing right now, right? You have the ability to go and create and do and so much more than you're giving yourself any credit for. And I remember I used to do that with kids in basketball. I'll give you a very quick story because I know we're almost at time, but I coached under 16 boys basketball, and I was brought into a club in Adelaide, South Australia that had never really won anything, right? Certainly certainly the boys' teams had never won anything. And I got this team, and every kid in this team was tiny, right? And we're playing in a league where guys are literally bigger, going through puberty, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And no one expected them to win. The parents didn't, they didn't, right? So we did one thing. And at that time, I was a personal trainer, so I was kind of into fitness. I said, what we're going to do is we're going to work so hard. We're going to basically double the time of practice. This will definitely connect with probably what you do, Elliot. I said, we're not going to train for an hour. We're going to train for 2 hours, right? And we're going to do an hour of skills, and then at the end, we're going to do an hour of just fitness work. And the parents are like, oh, this is painful, whatever. But they all went for it. And what ended up happening, I'll cut the long story short, we ended up winning the championship that year. Right. And we ended up winning the grand final against a team that was undefeated all season. We didn't have a great season up to that, but we got into the grand final, and we won it in the second half by endurance and speed, right? The fact that we, were basically fitter and we were faster. These guys were a lot taller, and I think they were complacent. But here's the thing. What I said to these guys, these boys, these 14, 15-year-old boys, is I said, you know what? The reason that you're going to win is because I know, and you know, that there is not one team that's done the work this year, this season, than you've done. So what I really did in that was give them the belief by the action that they couldn't or didn't deserve to lose. And we won. And I think, you know what? I've probably done that if I think back all the way through my life with different situations, but I've never really understood that's what I was doing.
Yeah. It's amazing when you do it, right? It's so fucking cool.
Yep.
It's so cool.
I don't know where that came from, by the way, Elliot. Yeah. Did I learn that somewhere? Who knows, right? No idea.
Maybe, look, like I said, maybe God gave it to you. Maybe, the universe gave it to you. It doesn't matter. The hard part is discovering it. Because once you do, it's like the red pill, blue pill thing again. You can't not do it, right? You can't not do it. So, Nick, tell everyone where they can reach out to you, where they can find you, Instagram, social media, your websites, all that stuff, your podcast.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah. So the podcast, I'll start with that because we talked about it. So, because it's changed a lot. It was, as I said, Scale Up Your Business, and now it's Scale Up with Nick Bradley. And the cool thing that I really am proud about is it used to be more business orientated. It's still a business podcast, but there's so much mindset in there. It's kind of interwoven. And then I just bring interesting people on, like across all sorts of areas. I've brought athletes on. I brought in a guy called Dean Karnazes who ran across America. I've had all sorts of people like that on. And these days it's about people who are really interested in how they can scale their lives more so than everything else. And it's a lot about identity, right? It's a lot about who you need to become to create that. So there's that. And if people want to kind of reach out to me, I'm on Instagram. I think I'm not very good with social media. I think it's at The Real Nick Bradley. You can check that out. Or my website is highvalueexit.com. where, again, that's where people can kind of reach out if they want to kind of get in touch about any of the stuff that we do.
Awesome. Guys, as always, don't go out in the world and try to be Nick. Nick has his unique and special gift that he has. He gives to the world. Don't go out in the world and try to be me. I do my thing that I go out and give to the world. Everybody, please go out there and find your own power. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found something useful that you can take and implement into your life. Don't forget to head over to wherever you are listening to this podcast and leave a review. That would be greatly appreciated. Also, go follow me on social media at FireMarshal205 on Instagram. Leave a comment, anything that you would like there. And as always, if you think this would be useful for somebody else that you know for their life, send it their way. That would be greatly appreciated. That's it for this episode, guys. I hope you all have a great day and you go step into that power so that you can give your purpose to the world.